All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're diving into just one source, the daily update from HastingsNow.com. We're going to see what we can learn by looking at a single day in a single place. Hastings, Minnesota, on Monday, January 26th, 2026. And that really is the big question, right? What can one day in one town really tell us? Well, as we're about to find out, any given day, even one that feels totally ordinary, is packed with all kinds of stories. What's happening right now, what's going on locally, and some things that are surprisingly historic. So, let's start with the most immediate thing, the thing that everyone in Hastings is feeling on this day, the weather. This is what puts us right there, on the ground, in that specific moment. I just love this line from the source. You know exactly what that feels like, don't you? The sun is out, it looks beautiful, but the second you step outside, ugh, that cold just hits you. It perfectly sets the scene. So let's look at the actual numbers. The high for the day is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, for Minnesota in January, that's chilly, but you can deal with it. But then, of course, the sun goes down, and that temperature drops to just 3 degrees. Okay, now we're getting into some real cold. But hold on, that's not even the full picture. Because the real story here is the wind chill. It makes it feel like negative 26 degrees. Wow, that is a whole different level of cold. That's the kind of cold that's actually dangerous. This one number changes everything about what it's like to be outside. And this table kind of breaks it all down for us. You can see there's a small chance of flurries later in the day. That wind is shifting around, and that's what's causing that brutal wind chill. And no surprise, there's an official cold weather advisory. And this is great. This is the weather joke of the day from the source, and it just nails the local vibe, you know? It's funny, but it's also genuinely good advice. It's that kind of shared humor that helps you get through a day like this. So the bottom line for anyone actually in Hastings is pretty simple. Layers are your best friend, cover up everything, and maybe don't plan a long walk, especially not in the morning. This is definitely an indoor kind of day. Okay, so we've got a really good feel for the immediate reality in Hastings. Now let's pull the camera back. Let's pivot from what's happening in the present and start looking at the deeper historical layers of this one date, January 26th. And this is where things get super interesting. We're about to see how this one spot on the calendar, a day that feels so quiet and cold in Hastings, has been filled with all sorts of major events throughout history. Let's start with something that hits close to home. On this very day, back in 1978, Minnesota was right in the thick of a huge fight called the Power Line Controversy. And this was no small thing. On January 26th, 1,500 people showed up to protest at the Minnesota State Capitol. That is a huge number of people coming together to make their voices heard. And that's why it's so important. This protest, it wasn't just about the power lines themselves. It was part of this much bigger conversation about some really fundamental stuff. Who gets to decide what happens to the land? What kind of infrastructure do we build? And what happens when regular citizens organize and push back? Okay, so we've gone from a freezing day in Hastings to a major moment in Minnesota state history. Now we're going to zoom out even further and look at what else happened on January 26th on the world stage. Get this, way back in 1654, this date set a dramatic story in motion. An order in Brazil forced a group of refugees to flee. They set off on this incredible journey that, months later, ended with 23 of them founding the very first Jewish community in a little place called New Amsterdam, which we now know as New York City. Just an unbelievable story of resilience. Then, on the exact same date in 1926, the world shifted on its axis again. In a little room in London, an inventor named John Logie Baird showed off a new device he'd created. He called it television. It was one of the very first public demonstrations of an invention that would, well, literally change the world we live in. So let's try to wrap our heads around all of this. We've got the immediate physical reality of a bone-chilling winter day in Minnesota. And on that same day, we have these deep historical echoes of protest, of migration, of world-changing invention. How did these things even connect? Well, this slide really puts it all side by side. On the left, you've got the simple, tangible reality of life in Hastings. It's about staying warm. On the right, you have these huge human dramas and incredible breakthroughs that also define what January 26th is. It's the everyday and the epic, all sharing the exact same 24 hours. And really, that's the whole point. Every single day, even the quietest, coldest, most ordinary day of our lives, is part of this amazing, complicated tapestry. We're living out our own story right here and now, on a day that also holds all of these other incredible stories from the past.
So I guess I'll just leave you with this question to think about. The next time you're just going about your day, maybe take a second to wonder what else happened on this date. What journeys, what protests, what big ideas are woven into the fabric of your ordinary day. Thanks for digging into this with me.